The entire population discusses the proposals contained in the theses presented by Comrade Khrushchev on how to reorganize the ways in which industrial and construction work are managed. Discussions took place at various shops of Tallinn's machine plants. The boilermakers, among others, agreed that the People's Economic Councils ought to replace the Ministries of Industry. In the future, the Republic will specialize in the production of machines and devices that don't require much metal to construct. Employee of the Punane Red Plant Uno Rinnimeri, the 22nd Party Congress inspires us all. We will work to attain the goals of the party program and build up communism. Khrushchev's attempt to give a boost to local initiatives had a beneficial effect on the development of the national economy. People's Economic Councils were established during 1957. The Estonian SSR constituted one district, which all industrial production was subordinated to. In 1965, after Khrushchev had been removed from office, the People's Economic Councils were eliminated, and the system by which all management decisions were taken in Moscow was restored. Estonia's primary form of industrial activity remained focused on the production of oil shale, which was largely consumed by Leningrad and the Russian Northwest. I'd like to say that the period involving the People's Economic Councils was one of the more positive episodes in the history of Soviet economic policy. A variety of rights that had been previously the prerogatives of Moscow were now delegated to the republics, to the local People's Economic Councils. I had a good working relationship with the Union Republic Ministry of Foodstuffs, with a minister by the name of Zotov, a very cultured older gentleman. He was a man of substance, and we hit it off well. He helped me solve a whole series of problems. Back then, that's how the system worked. If you managed to work with the right man at the right time and had a good working relationship with him, you could solve things.
Tol ajal oli niisugune süsteem, et kui sa ikka õige mehe juurde jõudsid õigel ajal ja temaga veel heas vahekorras olid, et siis sai lahendada.
The party altered the ethnic makeup of Estonia as industrialization intensified. Laborers were recruited from the far reaches of Russia. The new arrivals were given housing ahead of everyone else. Long live the fraternal friendship of the peoples of the Soviet Union. Hurrah! 270,000 Russians lived in Estonia in 1959. By 1970, that number had grown to 380,000, constituting 28% of the population. Most of them settled in the cities. The party took pains to cultivate Soviet patriotism and internationalism in the value system of the Estonians and tried to make new traditions take root. Well, there was a fellow named Rein Välja here in Soldino. We'd been in Siberia together. He said, "Listen, get over here to the Baltic power station. They're getting ready to power it up and need a lot of extra labor. I'll talk to the head of the section. Come on over." We took the bus. The way it worked was, if there were 2 Russians, you had to speak Russian. And if there were 2 Estonians and a Russian, well, you still had to speak Russian. So it was just the 2 of us. We could talk to one another. But as soon as a Russian was present, we had to switch to Russian. So we came on the bus with Yuri. And another man was also there. We joked around and stood in the bus talking. And then they shouted at us, "Shut up, you crow! Stop your screeching!" Don't you know how you're supposed to talk when there's others on board besides yourselves? 2 days went by, and we were summoned to the security police. They wanted to know what we've been talking about. I didn't experience ethnic problems in the collectives where I worked with Estonians. Well, maybe at drinking sessions, but it wouldn't be right to call that ethnic friction. Not, "You're a Russian and I'm an Estonian," nothing like that. Still, when all is said and done, I understood that Estonians didn't care at all that much for Russians. This had more to do with the regime that brought people here and not with animosity towards all Russians. Everyone knew that the standard of living here in the Baltic was one of the best in the Soviet Union. In other republics, the standard of living was lower. People migrate to places where life is better. They came here and regarded it as their homeland, but actually this was the homeland of the Estonians. The system was designed to create a hodgepodge of peoples.
В других республиках уровень жизни меньше был, а люди едут туда, где легче жить. И ехали, считали как родина, а все-таки это родина, да, все-таки это эстонцев родина, а система была такая, что надо было, чтобы везде все смешаны были.
The President of the Republic of Finland, Urho Kekkonen, arrived in our republic for an unofficial visit at the invitation of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Estonian SSR, accompanied by his wife. The President was greeted by Chairman of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the ESSR, Alexei Mürisepp, members of the government of the Republic, and representatives of social organizations. The fact that a language is spoken here that is rather familiar to us and reminiscent of home gives Estonia an interesting place in the thoughts of all Finns and brings us closer together. The President of Finland said that cultural relations between Finland and Estonia are vital to both countries. He visited Estonia in March of '64 to lend his support to the Estonian way of life. The price that Moscow demanded for this opportunity to develop relations involved efforts to make Finns stop associating with Estonians in exile. During the summer of 1965, scheduled shipping services between Tallinn and Helsinki were restored at the initiative of Finland and with the permission of Moscow. The traditional procession of warships took place in the Bay of Tallinn. The sailors of the Baltic Fleet stand as a wall around our territory. The new situation was quite useful for the arts. This was a new wave. Granted, the earlier postulates remained unchanged as far as the treatment of history was concerned. For example, during Stalin's time, it had been obligatory to constantly emphasize the friendly relations of the Estonians and the Russians throughout the ages. This ancient friendship accompanied us at every step, and everything that had its origins in the West was as bad as could possibly be. This changed now. Even so, some rather formal paradigms remained in place. Opportunities to research the Estonian cultural heritage improved. It became possible to once again research some of the negative and reactionary figures who had been previously banned. It was all right to mention them again, and the tapestry of history became more variegated.
Nüüd siiski paljud tulid jälle välja ja see ajaloopilt kujunes siiski palju mitmekesisemaks.
The magnificent spirit of the 7-year plan merits being treated by the artist's brush. Mine number 8, a real miner poses for the artist. The artists take this task just as seriously as the work that is going on some meters beneath the surface. The pressure applied to culture lessened. Although some manuscripts never saw print and some plays were banned, the intellectual environment improved, particularly in the visual arts, where aesthetic considerations were once again given their due. Sometimes we put the large constructions aside. What do you think of the figure study? The female nude. The writers of the Republic met for the 5th time. The Congress was opened by the dean of our writing tradition, Friedebert Douglas. Leonid Lenzman presented the greetings of the Communist Party of Estonia. In 1956, permission was granted to publish the selected anthologies of the refugee poet Suitsenunder. At the same time, the Central Committee of the party and the censorship board Glavlit conducted a thorough search for all forms of expression that might harbor the slightest hint of anti-Soviet thought.